and welcome to another tutorial. My name is tMySQL, and this time we're going to be going over how we can use the tMySQLKit that I've created in order to communicate MySQL with Swift natively in your iOS, watchOS, tvOS, and even macOS applications. Let's begin. So now, first of all, we know that we have two things over here. Now, first of all, let's pretend we have a MySQL server. Okay, so we have MySQL server. Now we also have now I'm going to make a dotted box here. And I'm just going to say Swift. Now, basically, we have a Swift end and we have a MySQL end. Now, in the Swift end, we have an application, your application. Okay, and the MySQL. Now the thing is, your application stores data. Let's say it's a chatting app. It stores its data in the MySQL server. Now there's a problem. We know that Swift and MySQL don't communicate with each other. They don't know each other's language. They're completely different. And so usually what you need to do is you need to create your own sort of PHP bridge between your MySQL server and Swift. Okay, now there's a big problem with this happening. First of all, it's very specific to this MySQL server and this Swift application. Okay, it's not universal. If you want to put this bridge in a different application, it won't work. You're going to have to change a lot of parameters. It's very hard coded into the system. And even if you do manage to not hard code it, that takes a bit of time to code in. However, tMySQLKit solves all of those problems for you. Essentially, what tMySQLKit does is it erases this bridge between MySQL and Swift, and what it does is it replaces the bridge with a very convenient wrapper of PHP around MySQL. So, for example, I can just create a little wrapper here around MySQL. Now, this is built in PHP. All right. So now PHP does this. Now this PHP end is noted. I call this tMySQLKit. Alright, so this is tMySQLKit, the PHP end. However, tMySQLKit has two parts. It has a PHP part and it has a Swift part. So there's another part apart from just your application. There's the tMySQL Kit here as well. Alright, so now there are two parts to the two tMySQLKits. Now the thing is, your application, instead of communicating directly with MySQL, you're going to communicate with tMySQLKit. However, you will feel right at home because tMySQLKit runs, essentially you could call it natively. It allows you to use the same MySQL syntax, the same MySQL queries, everything. You can give it your query in string format, for example, select star from table name, and the table name could be users, as a string to tMySQLKit. You'll feel, as I said, you'll feel like you're communicating directly with MySQL, and your application will give tMySQLKit a request. Okay. Now you pretend as if you're talking with MySQL because tMySQLKit returns you the result. But what happens is, in order for tMySQLKit to actually return that result, what it'll do is it'll take your request and it'll do a bit of processing on that. It'll convert that request to a URL request. Then what happens is that gets sent over to this PHP end. Alright, and so here in the PHP end, some sort of conversions happen and some processing, and then it goes straight into the MySQL. Once MySQL, does its loading, once it's done handling your request and it has a response for you, that goes in JSON format to PHP, but it's not just JSON, of course. It's encoded, and so essentially PHP will then take that, decode that, okay, send that back to tMySQLKit, And then what that's going to do is it's going to convert the JSON string to NS data, which they've now renamed to data with Swift 3 in the next release of the Foundation framework. They've converted the NS data to data and NS URL to URL and stuff like that. And essentially this goes to the tMySQLKit on the Swift end, and then finally, after some processing and conversions, it goes back to your application where you feel just at home communicating with MySQL. And it doesn't even look like it's actually communicating with a server, just seems like it's running locally on Swift. And that is essentially what I'm going to be showing you how to do. Now again, the real advantage to this is that this wrapper and this framework are universal. They will run with almost any MySQL server in the world. Alright, you just load this onto the Apache server that accompanies the MySQL server. You put this into your Swift application. Technically, this would also work on an Objective-C application because you could integrate Swift into your Objective-C project, and you're off. And so that's going to be it for the whiteboard part today. One more thing just before we get into the Mac part though, is that this application can be quite a good and useful parse alternative. If you have, let's say, a website like a GoDaddy website where you have MySQL hosting, and for example, you wanted to, migrate from Parse, because of course that's shutting down. You want to migrate from Parse to, let's say, MySQL instead of some other database like MongoDB. You don't want to self-host Parse because that would be, let's say, too hard to set up for you, or you don't have enough resources. And so essentially, you can use tMySQLKit, which, if you were wondering, T stands for tMySQLKit. So you can use tMySQLKit on your GoDaddy server, which is just a PHP file, PHP wrapper. You can connect to your MySQL database, your MySQL database, and your Swift end can communicate with that tMySQL PHP end with its Swift end. And that's going to be it. So as you can see, that really makes it easy to migrate from Parse to something like MySQL. That's going to be it for the tutorial today. Alright, so now let's move over to the Mac part, where I'm going to be explaining to you how exactly you can use tMySQLKit along with just a MySQL server and actually, host a database and access it with Swift and feel right at home communicating with MySQL with its normal queries. Let's get right to it. So welcome back to the Mac part, and now I'm going to be showing you how exactly you can use MySQLKit in your iOS and watchOS and tvOS and macOS applications. Let's begin. So as you can see, I have this little sample application ready, but I will actually be showing this to you a bit later. But to begin, first of all, on my server over here, I'm running PHPMyAdmin, and as you can see, I actually have this products available database, and inside the products available database, I have an ice cream table. And in the ice cream table, I have a flavor and quantity sort of column, or columns. And first of all, the flavor is text, and the quantity is an int. Alright, so now let's begin. First of all, our objective is to be able to use Swift to run these queries. Insert into ice cream, flavor quantities, flavor quantity, values chocolate 5, meaning 5 chocolate ice creams, and also 3 strawberry ice creams. We want to get those into the database, and then select star from ice cream, meaning select everything from ice cream, and then convert that data to a string, and then print self. And so, first of all, I know these don't exist. These aren't real functions in Swift, but I've created extensions that allow this to happen. So now, in order to explain what I mean, let's actually get into the source code of tMySQLKit. Let's begin. So first of all, of course, I'm importing Foundation, and then I have an extension to the data class. Now, of course, they're renaming NS data to data and NS URL to URL and stuff like that. They're removing the next step. NS actually stands for next step, fun fact. And so they're stripping that off because next step is years old, like almost a decade now, more than a decade technically. And so they've removed NS. So now also, basically I've created an as string sort of what do you call this, computed property, and so what I can say is I've created this as string computed property, which is a string, and essentially it returns a string data of self, and then the encoding string.encoding.utf8. Now, of course, in a real sort of application scenario, you probably wouldn't use this because, I mean, it assumes UTF-8 encoding, which is pretty common, so that's why I did that. And of course, it also forcefully unwraps this optional, which is not the best way to do things. But for an extremely simple application, this works. And so essentially, this will convert data to a string really easily. Then essentially, there's an extension to the string class, and essentially I'm using the URL encoded computer property that I'm creating, and essentially this is going to return a string, and it will return self.adding % with allowed characters, and is character set.url path allowed. And so essentially this will just URL encode a string. So like if I have this query that I want to send to MySQL, I'm going to URL encode it before I actually send it to MySQL. Because of course it's going over an HTTP request. Then also in the same string extension, I have a function called print self, which returns a string, and so essentially it prints self and then returns itself. So that sort of is pretty convenient. Instead of putting print around the entire thing, it becomes a bit more clean to read. And then finally, the juicy part. MySQLKit, tMySQLKit. And so essentially tMySQLKit, inside of that we have a variable called MSKHandler, MySQLKit handler. And now this is the link to the PHP script on your website, which I will be showing you in just a moment. That's on my server right now. And so essentially that's going to be a string. Or actually, in this case, a nil string. It currently has no value. And also a database variable, because when you initialize MySQLKit, you give it the database that you want to connect to. So then it gives the MySQLKit on the server end that database, so it knows what to connect to, and then it gives it the query. So that's pretty interesting as well. So in the initializer, I just ask for an MSK handler as a string, and a database as a string, and then I set the self values to exactly that, whatever they gave through the initializer. However, I mean, they actually currently cannot initialize without giving those. So you could create a nil MySQLKit object, but you cannot initialize MySQLKit without an MSK handler in a database. Alright, so next I have a function that I've created called runRequest_data. Now I'm going to be creating more functions in the future and later releases of the MySQLKit framework, or MySQLKit code, and essentially right now it returns data, but soon I'll also create JSON, array, integer, stuff like that, for it to return it to you as well, instead of you having to convert the data to whatever else you'd like. But anyway, so basically this function will run a request to the tMySQLKit side on the PHP end, and essentially what happens is this function asks for a query from the developer. And so that's as a string, of course, just normal MySQL query, which is really what is so powerful about MySQLKit. You can give it a normal MySQL query, and then it will return data to you. Again, they're stripping NS from NS data to make it just data. Then essentially what I do is I create a final URL, which is equal to the MSK handler that was given to us, which is the PHP end, the URL to the PHP end, and then I just add question mark, meaning now the parameters come in of the URL of the HTTP request, and for the DB, which is database, I send the database variable over here. But I URL encode that first. And once I URL encode that, that goes into the string. And then another parameter is query, and so I just URL encode the query. So that's that. And also I return force try data, contents of URL, string of this URL that I've created. Again, in a real life situation, I guess, you wouldn't exactly use this code, because the thing is, with this code, we're first of all forcefully trying something and forcefully unwrapping the URL. So if the URL is not valid, it's going to crash. If the data isn't returned, then it's going to crash. And so you would probably want to implement some error handling, but this is the bare bone sort of code that you're going to be putting in order to actually make your application able to contact MySQL. After that, you can implement your error handling as well, the way you'd like it, whatever you'd like it to do. This is how it's actually going to contact it. Alright, so now let me also show you over here, if I open up the file manager on my server here, If I scroll down, as you can see, I have this PHP file called getAnything, and if I go to the code editor here, or I believe I already have that open, but anyway. As you can see, basically I have my username filled out and I have my password filled out. Now, essentially, these username and password credentials need to be of your MySQL database, and the host, of course, needs to be the host of the MySQL database as well. In this case, since I'm running it on my own server, this is localhost, but if you were running this remotely, like this PHP and or the Apache or the PHP script is, let's say, running locally on an iOS device, for example, and your MySQL server is on the cloud, then you actually want to give it the host of the MySQL server. But since I'm running the PHP end and the MySQL end side by side on the same server, which GoDaddy happily does for me, even though, I mean, Mac and Cloud does as well, or really any Mac hosting service, you can just use localhost because, of course, they are beside each other and don't really need to go remote to find each other. Alright, so then, as you can see, just, in my other database tutorials, the normal connecting to MySQL code, but except for the fact that I'm not giving it a database to connect to. I'm actually finding a database from the parameters, which I'm using _get to retrieve from the URL, and so I'm using db, which is the parameter that is passed in order to, give the database to the PHP script. So that connects to the database, and if it's unable to do that, it's just going to say unable to connect. However, if it is able to do that, then it will get the query into a query variable, and then get the results as JSON and echo them to the screen. And after that, what happens is Swift will take that, convert that to NS data, and send that off back to your application. And that is quite a bit. But now, as you can see, back to PHPMyAdmin, in the ice cream table, there's currently nothing. No quantity of ice cream, and that's not good for business. We can't sell anything, okay? So let's say we receive a shipment of 5 chocolate ice creams and 3 strawberry, okay? And so basically we want to insert into ice cream with flavor and quantity the values chocolate 5 and strawberry 3. Alright, let's try this out. So now, essentially what should happen is it should insert 5 chocolate in there, it should insert 3 strawberry, and then it should print exactly what happened with the select command. However, one more thing I'd like to do is do this one by one so you can actually see it happening in PHPMyAdmin. So if I comment out these 2 lines of code, then if I run this on my simulator here, then you'll be able to see that, first of all, the simulator shows nothing. But right after this is done printing lots of stuff, which I'm not exactly sure why this prints out. I have done a little bit of research. It's because of, the data, how it's synchronous and how it's not able to connect to the server properly. But, again, you don't need to worry about this. These are just warnings, and these aren't actually errors. So now, this should be done inserting into the database. Let's see. So now if I go over to PHPMyAdmin and I click on ice cream, as you can see, chocolate 5. MySQLKit is working till now. Let's try and see what happens when I insert something of, let's say, strawberry. Alright, so I'm going to run this once more into the simulator. Right as it loads up on the simulator and it's done printing lots of stuff, all its warnings, we'll know it's done. Now it has to print one more thing, I believe. Yeah, there we go, and it should be done. If I refresh in PHPMyAdmin, as you can see, it's inserted strawberry. Now, all I need to do is just uncomment this last line of code, which will actually select from the ice cream database, convert that NS, or data, just data now, they've removed NS, so convert that data to a string, and then print the string. Let's try it out, shall we? Alright, so now if I run this, as you can see, the simulator is going to load up, iPhone SE, and just as you can see, it is done, and it has selected this result. Yeah, as you can see here, it says flavor, chocolate. This is actually an array of dictionaries, and the first dictionary is flavor, chocolate, quantity 5, I'm just going to highlight that there, and flavor strawberry, quantity 3. And that's how MySQLKit works. I really hope you enjoyed that tutorial, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can actually contact me if you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas at my email, taggyman@gmail.com, and down in the comments below, or on my Twitter at taggymanny. The source code will, as always, be in the description. And again, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like and share it with anyone you think that it might help. Again, thank you very much, and if you really liked it, you can even subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a lot. That's going to be it for my tutorial today. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. Goodbye.